Hello and welcome to pmclounge.com. In this video, I am going to go over a report that came out of PMI. It is called Global Mega Trends 2022. As professional project managers, we are expected to not just be PMP certified and not just know the latest agile ways of working and be certified in those agile ways of working and all that. That's all fine and dandy. That's the education part of the coin. The other side of the coin is to be able to know the kind of projects that we are going to manage in the coming future, the kind of shifts that are happening in the project management industry, right? So, to be able to understand what's happening in the world of project management, what's happening in the project management industry as a whole, reports like these are going to be very, very helpful. So, it's called Global Mega Trends. It has been published by PMI, all copyrights acknowledged, no copyrights infringement intended. I'll share a link, direct link to this report in the description below. It's available for free for everyone to download and go through, which I would highly urge that you do so. Now, there are 6 mega trends that this report talks about, and we'll go over all of them. I've highlighted some of the points that I would want to discuss in all 6 of them. The first one is digital disruption. Now, before we go there, I'd like to remind you that going over reports like these are not going to help you clear your PMP exam, right? Like I said, the education part of project management is different, and then the actual changes, the actual shifts. Of course, some of the questions you may find interrelated in the exam to the actual changes and the actual shift. That's perhaps the reason why the PMP exam is now 50 to 60% agile plus hybrid and not just waterfall, because that's the actual shift on ground. But reports like these are going to give you insights in the times to come for the project management industry. So, being PMP certified is all good, but to be a true professional, you should be able to tell your teammates, your junior members, junior project managers about the future of project management. And that's where reports like these come into the picture. So let's talk about digital disruption here. There is almost no field of endeavor that is free from constant drive of technology change. This is like a true statement right here, right? So even before we get used to the latest collaboration tool or smart home appliance, newer technology arrives with up-to-date features. Very, very true. The new products that keep launched, keep being launched in the world that we live in. The runway between a previous version of the product versus the latest version of the product has reduced significantly. So, I mean, look at mobile phones, for example. One company is going to launch 3 or 4 mobile phones in the same year. So the runway between the gap between two product launches has decreased significantly, and that is what this paragraph is talking about. Because even before you get used to the latest tool, newer technology basically arrives. While these solutions can save time, improve productivity, and support innovation, they can also present risks such as data breaches and loss of privacy. This is something that we've been seeing world over, right? Especially some of the large social media companies are facing the ire of this data breaches, loss of privacy, manipulation based on data that they basically gather. So that's something that is a challenge, of course. So digital disruption point talks about it. So the pandemic greatly accelerated an expansion of digital technologies, especially tools to enable online collaboration and remote work. We've seen industries adopting remote work, right, like no other, right? So the trend toward remote work had been gaining speed, facilitated by digitization and improved connectivity. But any barriers or hesitation, so this was obviously happening before the pandemic hit also, right? A lot of industries, not just the IT and software industries, a lot of other industries were also trying to see if they can incorporate work from home, but remote work. And then the pandemic hit, and a lot of industries actually went in and they went all out on remote work. So any barriers or hesitation about adopting a remote model were swept aside as the ability to work from home became necessary to carry on normal business. So this was no longer an option, right? This was no longer remote work was no longer one of those things that, hey, I'm not feeling well today, so I will be working from home. We had no option like that, because everybody, all industries had to somehow adopt work from home, get an element of work from home. Of course, industries that require you to be present on ground cannot have work from home element to it, but certain roles in those industries can also adopt work from home, which they actually did. So what is needed to work through this digital disruption, right? So there is reskilling and upskilling of digital workforce that is required. So PMI identifies 6 areas as the top digital age skills for product delivery. And this is where reports like these are important. Like I said, at the education side, you can look forward to all the certifications. But on the ground, delivering projects, these are the kind of skills that you need. You need innovative mindset, legal and regulatory compliance knowledge, security and privacy knowledge, data science skills, ability to make data driven decisions, collaborative leadership skills. So after your PMP, a certified Scrum Master certification or an ACP certification might not provide you with these skills that this report is telling you, which is required for the digital workforce, which is a global mega trend basically. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. The next global mega trend is climate crisis. Now, we all are aware of climate crisis. I'm pretty sure you must have heard about it. There is a lot of knowledge out there. There is a lot of, I would say, awareness about climate in the recent times for sure. So, world leaders attending the 2021 UN Climate Change Conference, this was called COP26, they proclaimed that the need for urgent action. However, progress to address climate change has been elusive. Moving forward, sustainability practices need to be built into every project and process. So, there you have it here itself, right? This line tells you why this is important for the project management industry. A project is basically introducing some sort of change, and don't just think about the software industry, right? All industries have some sort of projects running at all times. Now, with the climate crisis becoming a mega trend, what this means is sustainability practices. So let's say you're working in the construction industry. What are the sustainable practices that you can introduce in your project to tackle this climate crisis, right? So to be aware of climate crisis has become very, very important for project managers as well. And this is important if the world is to arrest the most damaging effects of global warming. So warming, not warning, but I think it's one and the same thing. So the US and EU have committed to carbon neutrality by 2050. China pledged to do the same by 2060 and India by 2070. That means if you are delivering projects, let's say in the US and EU areas, in the next 15-20 years, you are going to see significant climate related compliances be part of your projects, because the idea is that US and EU want to become carbon neutral by 2050. So obviously your projects are going to see some sort of compliance activities related to climate be a part of your projects, of course. So to help turn the tide, businesses must take on more responsibility. 1/5 of the world's largest companies have set net zero targets. So if you are one of those that are working in the 1/5 of the world's largest companies, I'm pretty sure the discussion around climate crisis is happening at the top leadership level and is going to trickle down sooner or later, if not already done. Now, one of the other important things here, project managers will need to integrate emission targets into key performance indicators, build emission management into ways of working, and engage with all stakeholders about sustainability practices. That is why, as a professional project manager, you should know this global mega trend. You should know what's happening in the world over. 1/5 of the world's largest companies setting net zero targets. You should be aware of that as a project management professional, because you are the one who is going to engage with your stakeholders about the sustainability practices. You are the one who is going to introduce climate crisis, right? Some of the emission target as the KPIs in your projects. Some useful graphs and charts here that you can go over at your own leisure. We will move to the next point here, the next mega trend, which is demographic shifts. And this is important as well as interesting. There was a talent gap report by PMI, of course, and it talked about global economy would need 25 million new project professionals by 2030. Now, what's happening at the same time is you need this many new project professionals, but at the same time there is a declining fertility rate problem in the whole world, and also an increasing percentage of workers that are aging out of the workforce. So organizations will need to find new ways to elevate worker shortages and close the talent gap. So the problem here is twofold, right? Fertility rates dropping and population, the working age population actually aging and going into retirement. So many developed economies are experiencing a rise in the effective retirement age. Working more years, however, won't offset the overall decline in the working age populations. The need for skilled project managers and other change makers is only going to increase as industries become more projectized. So again, two things here. One, it talks about project management, and of course project managers are also change makers, but it also talks about how industries are becoming more projectized. Another important point here for project managers will have to develop the necessary leadership skills to work closely with human resource managers to implement equitable and inclusive policies to support age diverse personnel. So your diversity area, right? It is now increasingly going to talk about age diversity as well, because the fertility rates are rising, working age population, their age is increasing, they are part of the aging population. So US project managers might have to work with people that come in the area of age diversity, that can be called age diverse personals, right? So there are 6 research points. Of course, you can go over them. How you can embrace technology, how you can get creative about finding and retaining talent. Look for talent abroad, because there are regions like Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. They offer pools of young talent. So there are certain countries in these areas where the fertility rates are not really going down. So I think that is where a lot of talent is going to come in our lifetimes itself, in the next 20, 30, 40 years. Harness the power of all change makers, no code, low code platforms. They can leverage existing employees in more efficient and cost effective manner. And then you have preserved knowledge from departing workers. Knowledge transition is, of course, very, very important. Now let's talk about the next megatrend, which is economic shifts. So the stresses created by the pandemic have led to supply chain disorder and rethinking of globalization. The issue here is complex. Rebuilding domestic supply chains is a long term undertaking, and permanent pullbacks are not certain. However, there are strategies that can be applied to mitigate global supply chain risks and facilitate cross border collaboration. So, this is talking about economic shifts. What has essentially happened is, we, before the pandemic, right, we lived in a globalized world. Things could get manufactured in China and be available in US the next week. Now the supply chain has actually gotten a hit because of COVID, because let's say some of the products being manufactured in certain parts of China was actually shut down because of COVID. So those products were not being able to ship to the US. So US has gotten a shortage of those products. So we live in a globalized world where everything is connected, and that is the economic shift. Now countries are looking at how they can increase global not global but local production, right? The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed long standing supply chain vulnerabilities, particularly over reliance on single source vendors and suppliers. If you have single source and that source is shut down because of COVID for the next month, then you know the trouble you and your business is in. So that's the over reliance that this paragraph talks about. A quick question is, Given existing skills and worker shortages, where will talent come from in countries that abandoned traditional manufacturing capabilities? So, when you've stopped manufacturing in your own country, you don't have talent to start manufacturing from the next month because you just don't have the people. So, that is one of the challenges in fixing the supply chain as well. Another thing for project managers specifically, project managers can also find ways to facilitate cross border projects through remote collaboration and knowledge sharing. So, this talks about how globalization is not going to go away, how you, as project managers, should have the ability and the capability to work with people living in different areas, living cross border, and getting the job done. How you should be able to collaborate remotely and how you should be able to share knowledge. So, that is something that as project managers we need to do. There are 8 ways to manage supply chain risks without abandoning globalization, because like I said, there are several issues. You cannot abandon globalization just like that. It has taken decades to be built and it cannot go away because of 2 years of pandemic, right? So there are 8 ways to manage the supply chain risks, which are mentioned here. Manage production and inventory levels more effectively. Stockpile critical components, very, very important. Reduce the length and complexity of supply chain. Diversify and improve reliability of suppliers. Prioritize quality. Reduce machine downtime. Make process improvements. Implement new technology. So these are some of the ways that can help this mega trend sail through this mega trend. Then we talk about labor shortages. We've already, all of us must have been aware of the global resignation or the great resignation in the US, particularly. So there is an exodus of employees and loss of institutional knowledge happening at organizations around the globe. That's why I said global resignation, not just the great resignation specific to US. And it's shaking up the workplace in ways we haven't seen or prepared for. How organizations react will determine whether there is a long-term trend or it is just a reset. Now, here's an important data point. 4.5 million Americans left their jobs in November, the highest level since this agency, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, they basically began tracking this data in 2000. So, at least for the last 22 years, right? 4.5 million Americans left their job. This is the highest number, at least for the last 22 years. It could be more because this agency was not even tracking this data earlier than 2000. The OECD, this includes 38 member countries, they found that 20 million fewer people are working now compared to before the pandemic, with a slow rebound predicted. So, some of the government offered really good benefits to those that lost their jobs, and those people that are getting such benefits might not want to come back to work till they are getting those benefits. That is also one of the reasons. Some people are just out of jobs and are yet to find new jobs. So you have 20 million fewer people working right now. That is a finding by OECD. These historic labor shortages are further complicated by disproportionate marginalization of women. This situation exacerbated by inequalities in caregiver roles and opportunity. Now, of course, this is a direct impact of the pandemic, because when the pandemic hit, everyone was home, and caregiver role is usually a mother's role, and a lot of women were out of work because they had to perform the caregiver role. So that is also one of the reasons of labor shortages. Now, in the near term, at least, many organizations may experience significant turnover and schedule delays. So again, this is the direct impact of COVID, is what we just talked about, how a lot of women performing caregiver role are out of workforce, and there's a great resignation going on. People are out of jobs, people are getting benefits, so they are not coming back to work, and that has a direct impact on the schedule of your projects, right? Team members and stakeholders alike leave for new opportunities. If closely monitored and controlled, quality could decline as the burden put upon remaining team members grows, obviously. So, organizations will need to reset the employer employee relationship to create a successful retention culture, aligning on social impact initiatives of importance to workers and providing greater recognition and rewards R&R again for employee contribution. So, uh, there is a need to ensure that your employees are retained, your employees don't leave, and this report talks about how you can provide greater recognition and rewards. You can work on social impact initiatives that are of importance, and you should create a retention culture. That is what this report is talking about. Now let's move on to the next one, the next global megatrend, which is civil, civic, and equality movements. What does this talk about? Despite ongoing restrictions due to COVID-19 pandemic, social protests continue to spill into the streets in 2021. We expect these protests to endure the economic effects and rising inequalities intensified by the pandemic contribute to the drivers for social unrest. But increasingly, we will also see boardrooms, office suites, and project sites become the settings for real change and collaboration in response to the civil, civic, and equality movement. So, we have seen this happening globally, and this is where DE and I, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts come into the picture. A lot of organizations are appointing CDOs, Chief Diversity Officers. This has risen over the past 5 years and it saw a massive spike in 2020. This is going to help achieve this, right? The need to blunt the effects of labor shortages will be a strong motivator for companies to build more inclusive cultures. So, we just talked about the labor shortage as one of the mega trends. And the last thing you want is people leaving your job because of DE and I, because they don't feel that diversity, people belonging to the diversity group are as welcome. There's no equity or there's not enough inclusion, right? So that is something because of labor shortages and companies appointing chief diversity officers, it is likely that the companies are going to pay a lot of importance to DE and I efforts. This is a graph. It talks about microaggressions that are faced by black women, LGBTQ plus women, and women with disabilities. Do go over this chart. It is an important one. So overall, a culture that embraces different perspectives will enable creative thinking and adaptability and result in improved business outcomes. CDOs, we just talked about it, Chief Diversity Officers, they have their work cut out for them. DE and I is not an issue that can be addressed by issuing some boilerplate statement and speaking strictly in legal and compliance terms. It demands being authentic and transparent. And this is an important part of the report, right? It demands everyone letting down their guard, being uncomfortable, being vulnerable, and willing to share emotions in their most raw state, be it sadness, anger, frustration, or fear. Because at its core, real business connections begin and end with genuine human connections. This is the most important line of this report. I think this should be the one takeaway. If you are taking away one thing out of this entire video, it is this line. Real business connections begin and end with genuine human connections. So, how the business side is connected to human side as well. As project managers, as project leaders, as people like us that work with different people from different geographies, different backgrounds, different cultures, we should aim to create human connections because that is where business connections also begin and end. So that's all that I had in this video. That's all that I wanted to talk about from this report. I hope you got value out of it. Like I said, this is not something that is going to help you with your PMP exam, but this is something that is going to help you on your actual job. This is something that is going to help you be a professional in the project management industry. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you.